Mike, it's been a while since we had one of our Thoughts of Chairman Mike chats. You've been very busy, of course, business-wise, travelling around the world. A lot of water has passed under the football bridge since then, and it hasn't been an ideal start for the New Saints in the Championship Conference.
No, that's football. I mean, there's no such thing as a straightforward result. I mean, we've had a very long, sustainable run of form over many seasons. If you look back 21 years, our form is one that's constantly sort of evolving and trying to evolve the game. So, we've had periods like this in the past. This season, at the end of the day, that's football. So we're damned if we run away with the league, and we're damned if conditions cause a little bit of frustration. Where this season we've put a pinpoint on where it is, and probably expect things to return to normal very soon. Can't legislate for so many injuries. Can't legislate for some players moving on or being moved on, and the transition in the back four early season obviously had paid its price in some of the earlier results. Overall there is a transition period happening. Yes, there's some new players coming in, and sometimes the transition is never going to be as smooth as what you'd like it. So I think. If you look at the game against Newtown, was particularly we got caught. It wasn't a particularly great game, and in fact, if anything, I think the players realised that they underperformed. They didn't get themselves up for the game, and paid the ultimate price. You can't do much about that. Those games will happen. I think the Bala game. At the end of the day, it was a game where we gifted them a soft goal, and again, through probably having to have forced changes on our team because of injuries, that obviously that has a little rub-on effect into how it comes out. And that game, I think, going forward, we showed pieces of play which were phenomenal. So again, and I think if you call the windy lottery that we played on Friday night, which at the end of the day, you're never going to play football in those type of conditions. And thought we mastered the conditions first half extremely well. Unfortunate to concede. So probably a 0-0 draw was probably written all over that. And hey-ho, it wasn't. So we move on.
And we conceded that goal very late in the first half, of course, in the 7th minute of added time. If it had been 0-0, Mike, going into the second period with the wind in favour of the New Saints, then it could have been a different story.
I don't think conditions like that favour the New Saints, whichever direction you kick the ball. I mean, it's we're not used to hoofing the ball up in the air, and I think, to be honest with you, if you look at it, Connah's Quay weathered the conditions better than us. And I thought towards the end of the second half, perhaps it wasn't quite so windy as patches within the earlier game. I thought they did get the ball down and they did run it, and they managed to create the time to run the clock down in an effective way without losing possession. So give them all credit, but those conditions are probably better suited to their style of play than ours. Their pitch is particularly windy and exposed anyway. It was more of a lottery. I think if the TV wasn't there, you would have probably looked at it and said, when chairs are blowing across the pitch and people being blown over, I had some fears during the game that those great big netted things from the Olympics could have fallen over, and if things like that do happen, people could get hurt. It wasn't. It was a fraction off being unsafe, but it was definitely not conditions to play football in.
Well, Mike, we have talked in past conversations about the league improving and teams catching the New Saints, and that's certainly true with Connah's Quay Nomads. They've lost just twice this season. Both in the league. They won the Nathaniel MG Cup. They're still in the JD Welsh Cup. As the chairman of TNS, how do you look at the overall picture of other teams catching TNS up and then thinking, how can I stay one step ahead?
Well, I think, obviously, as I said before, we have a small amount of transition with players that have been being brought in, and also we've had forced changes in the team with players having to play in other positions. So that has cost us a little bit this season. I'd expect us to continue the progress we've made over the number of years that we've progressed, and that we'll be back on top of that league very soon, and showing the style of football. And I think you've got to look at the two things. You've got to look at, there are eking out results, but there's also playing with style. Ultimately, the games of football which we want to be involved in move the ball, pass the ball, players bringing out their individual skills while remaining in a team game. And I commend every team that obviously sets out their stall to try and get their best result. And you can see that happening now with most of the clubs. They've gone through a standardisation of training with the FAW pro licences, and they have a manual of how to deal with everything. And it's one where they're obviously using those manuals to their effect. So I do expect them to continue to make things difficult for any team, and that goes in all outlets of football. You see that in the English Premier League. You see that in every league in the world. Teams set themselves up to their best ability to handle that game. And if you look at it, goals are a lot harder to score than defending a no-score situation. So it's always in the favour of the team of defending. You've got to be a lot better than the team you're playing against to score out those goals. They come along infrequently. Good defending will manage to nullify the effects of the best players in the world.
And as you've done, Mike, and rightly so, given credit to Connah's Quay Nomads, they currently sit 4 points ahead of the New Saints. Just one fixture to go between the teams. So TNS is in an unusual position in recent years of not actually being in control of its own destiny. How do you see the next 7 games panning out in the JD Cymru Premier?
Well, if you look at it, I mean, 7 games is over 20% of the season. If you look at it, there are a lot of games which will be highly competitive. There's something on them for every single team. So if each team play with the same determination to get one of those spots, I'd expect some more twists and turns before now and the end of the season. Injuries and suspensions will play a part. I mean, again, another centre half, got involved in a collision the other night, and obviously didn't come home from hospital until the next day. So those things you can't really legislate for. You can't legislate for a red card or a yellow card. So there's going to be more twists and turns, and I'd expect that the players that we have are good enough to realise that they've got a title battle on their hands. That's what the public wants. I'm still very, very confident that our players will put the right effort in to get the right results.
And when we spoke to Scott Rusco after the game, Scott was absolutely confident that we will be lifting that trophy again for the 9th consecutive season. Do you share that optimism in the manager?
As I said, all results are never as good or as bad as they first look. So the season is one where it's been a tough season, it's been a long season, but I remain extremely confident that at the end of the season, and that's still, as I said, 20% still to go, there's a very good chance that that title will be retained at Park Hall.
And I should have said, do you share the optimism with the manager, not in the manager?
Of course. I mean, basically, we have a succession planning here. The club is moving forward and continue to move forward. So it's one where the optimism that Scott shares comes from me, really. It's one where the club is an optimistic club. It's one where they've got to dig in. They've got to go and do what I know those players can do, and on a pitch which isn't blowing 60 or 70 mile an hour gales and is cut to perfection, I'd back our club to win 9 out of 10 times.
And Mike, as we look at the big picture, in recent times, we've interviewed John Rhodes, our head of recruitment, of course, Ian Williams, our chief operating officer, Scott Rusco, Steve Evans, and the staff. In terms of recruitment, as the chairman of the club, what role and input do you play and have in the ultimate signing or releasing of a player?
Well, ultimately, we've had certain simple rules here. Is if we win the league, all players that were involved in that season's victory will be offered contracts if they choose to stay with those contracts at the club. So at the moment, with not knowing where we are in the league, it's difficult to say, hey, which ones we want to retain and which ones but wouldn't be retained in a season which we weren't successful. So really, there is a bit of pressure going to become on the players to perform, which is what we want them to do. So they will be playing for next year's contracts for some of them. We also have targets of players that we'd like to bring to the club. But again, we as a club have a very, very strict wages policy. You know, I mean, some players that we've let go in the past have gone past very economical returns, and those players are still in the league. And, you know, albeit great servants of the club, sometimes you have to say, no, that doesn't fit the financial model. I mean, as a club, as you can see, sometimes the grass isn't greener on the other side either. I mean, Tom Holland left in the summer, which was quite a difficult place to replace, because he was an extremely good player with years of future left, and he obviously had his spell away from us, and has decided that his best career prospects was to return and to start rebuilding his future, with a view that perhaps if he gets a move next time, a club makes a careful consideration about his signing and not takes players at points when they might be financially more attractive to take. And that's something which is a difficult situation for any player to take, because I know that from speaking to other managers from other leagues who say, yeah, if I spend money buying a player, the chairman's going to ask me, why is he not playing? If I steal one at the end of their contract, then I'm not over worried if I don't put him in the team. So, you know, again, it can be quite a tough world outside in the game, and sometimes players think they're making the right move, and then they may find themselves in the reserves. You know, this obviously didn't happen with Tom. I mean, obviously their season ended and there was nowhere else for him to then go to play football. Windows were closed, etc., etc. So I think it's one where Tom will make a great addition back to the club. He's the right style of player that we're looking for, plays in the TNS way, and is an extremely good player. You know, and that's where we've always been fortunate, is that we've always secured good players, and perhaps players that are better than what else is available. And we have got one or two targets. We have got one or two players who have moved out this season and gone into other roles within the club just because they've physically come to an age of retirement from the professional game of football, or can only play a limited number of games. And I openly say Simon Spender is making that transition, but ultimately we've used him a lot this season. But ultimately, with those challenges will come. We look at Sarge. He's made a great transition into the academy, and we expect him to continue his football through FC Oswestry Town, which gives him a chance to still play football. And as I said, we've got one or two players that are at that sort of balancing point within their football career. But as a club, we're also quite loyal to those lads to ensure there isn't just a cold drop into the cold world of work, which, you know, it's that balance that sometimes has allowed us to get players of a better ilk, where their wives suppose say, well, actually, what happens if they only keep you for 2 years? We've got to pay the mortgage. And, you know, time goes on, and if that player, you can't find a visibly better player than that player, why not keep the one that you've invested the time and effort with? And that helps recruit the next generation. They go, well, actually, if I don't make the big move to the Championship or Premier League or wherever, at least I've got a job in a game I love to a point in time where I can't play the game anymore. And that's our philosophy. Hence why great players that we've got in our club, it's unfair to start listening, but all of those players are great players. You know what I mean? And they've shown that over the test of time, and I'm sure that the loyalty we show in them will pay out over the next 7 games. And I'll be looking forward to any contender titles clubs, which for now is really probably, it's back to 4 clubs that could win the league very easily. You know, Bala could easily pip everybody. Barry could come on the outside, and obviously Connors Quay's made a good fist of it this year. You know, so let's hope football is the winner, and that we don't have to play too many games in foul conditions.
And finally, Mike, you are a successful businessman. You do have your finger on the financial pulse with the club. We've made reference to the fact that other teams are slowly catching TNS up in terms of the quality of the league improving. You've already referred to the budget. Would there be plans, for example, in the future to increase that budget? And if so, would it be a significant increase?
Well, money is not the main ingredient in winning football matches. I mean, you can see that within the European competitions that we've entered. I mean, our books are at Companies House to analyse for our wages. We are the second lowest payer of wages within the Champions League competition. Only smaller budget than ours is San Marino. And even if you look in our league, the effective spend of some of our competitors is at least our money or beyond. When you look at the number of hours that they may get out of those players, or what they're paying for some of their key players. People will refer to wage bills, etc., etc. I know inside out the amount of money that's being paid on a number of key players in this league, and some of them are on a lot more than our players. And when they add their own work wages up to it, they're in very, very nice positions. That's their choice. That's how clubs want to work. I'm not here to look at that, but money isn't the first priority. It's systems, it's culture, and those things are being worked on all the time. And when you look at the results in Europe, which over the last 5-6 seasons, we're now expected to win. We've got ourselves to a seeded side of the Champions League draw. I can say that the performances that has to get put in to get there, even through the qualifiers, has to be demonstrably better than what's been played in any of the games of this league by not just us, but by any other team. So players, you could double wages and still end up with a team that's no more competitive. Narrowly losing twice to FC Copenhagen when their playing budget was 40 million euros. If you're going to beat FC Copenhagen, you actually aren't going to do that just on a straightforward financial basis, because those players are being paid levels of salary which you can't even get to. What you have to do is develop players that are capable of playing to the same standard of those, and then as and when those players get recognised for playing at that standard, hopefully those players are then able to be sold onto other clubs. So, and that's where you then start to build your budgets. You look at your academy structure and hope that the players coming through from the academy are good enough to enter the first team. And if they're poached away and get professional contracts at other clubs, then again, compensation kicks in. And you've got to look at that continual revenue streams that helps you put a team out onto the pitch that is suitably motivated and also has access to the best training, the best fitness, and being in a position that they feel that they are the best.
Chairman Mike, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.